the thing that I like to talk about, we're going to get into policies, and I'm a wonk. I can talk about that stuff and all the initials of all the new things, and DSM comes out every 8 years, and they got new titles, and we have to memorize them and act smart and have all this details. But really, what is the essence of what we do? What is the essence of what caused those women to be in the position they're in? Trauma, multi-generational poverty, lack of opportunity that leads to helplessness and hopelessness. This is why what happened in the late 90s, and we are still recovering from, is so evil. Because the industry that exploited where hopelessness and helplessness was in this country. When you look at where the opioids were distributed in masses, it was the Rust Belt, right? It was Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Tennessee, Kentucky. They did it calculatedly. Don't forget that the most vulnerable are susceptible to addiction. I know we don't call it addiction anymore. So, the most vulnerable are subject to substance use disorder, right? And I know why that is, because the addicts that started coming to me in 2003, 2004 didn't fit the MO of addict. They were still gainfully employed at that point because the pharmacies hadn't caught up and we hadn't caught up with how to stop it at its root. But so they were employed. They were still married, many of them. Their parents were still married. They didn't suffer sexual abuse or physical abuse, maybe neglect, right? And so the system had been traditionally since the 60s, and Synanon that evolved into Hazelden and all the rest of it, if you know the history of addiction treatment in America, was traditionally criminality, childhood sexual abuse, prostitution, crime, junkie. And so the new generation, this new created, brought to you by Pharmaceutical America, didn't fit the addiction. And they had a very difficult time because Dr. Drew can be very harsh. You're an addict. You got to say you're an addict. And they were like, I'm not like these people. And so SAMHSA, in I think 2003, 2004, came up with this title that never really caught on. It was called Pseudo Addict. Does anybody remember that title? You're kind of an addict, right? Well, if you're sick, unless you have opiates, you're addicted to them. But the diagnosis of addict, of addiction, that didn't fit because the treatment for that kind of addiction was trauma therapy and 12-step abstinence-based treatment. Luckily, the evolution of thought about addiction treatment and what addiction is, and we're all representing that, an integrated community of people, whether it's medication-assisted treatment, whether it's dealing with the homeless population, it's all interwoven, and we're all working together to solve it, right? So I like that it's open-minded, but it's a little hard for an old guy like me to keep up with all the titles. I don't think substance use disorder is going to catch on, just if you want to know my personal opinion. I think we're going to have a new one in like 3 or 4 years. So I thought I'd talk about what it is. What it is a lack of love. What recovery is love. I know you can't, let's get initials for it, LOVE. You know how we have CBT and this thing and MAT and MMAT. What about LOVE? Because that's what when you go to work every morning, that's why. Because you as a child cared about other people. There's a very great book called Naturally Therapeutic. I've always been naturally therapeutic. I cared about, hurt animals, kids that didn't have moms home, I'd bring them to our house. There are some of us, I believe you'll find later on, once we know science better and the brain better, that are genetically predisposed to compassion. And I think this room is filled with people like that.